So, is the church a business or is it a sanctuary? Funny, I heard somebody say that's why people don't go to church because they can't afford it. You know, maybe that's why there's just a stairway to heaven, but there's a highway to hell. I'm just saying, like, if the money is the root of all evil, then why are churches always asking for it? Okay, I know. That's no way to start a show, right? I will start over and I'll be right back. Well, hello, and welcome to In Your Ear Radio. I am your host, Latoya. Always so very happy to be with you on this fine Saturday. The weather is lovely, and I'm looking forward to going outside and getting some fresh air. And I hope that you all do the same. And how y'all doing? Y'all all right out there? Yeah, it's a lot going on since we last spoke, and we're going to get into it because I definitely have a lot that I have. I have some things I'd like to share with you, and I'm sure that you guys have your opinions too. We're definitely going to get into Marvin Sapp, yeah. I never would have paid it. I just wouldn't have. And I'm curious if people did. I'm just curious. But before we get into all of that, we got to get into what else is happening in the world because there is a lot going on, and we need to talk about that too. Yeah. So let's see. Today is the 29th, March 29th. On this fine day, 64 years ago, DC was awarded the right to vote when the 23rd Amendment was amended to the Constitution, which ratified the District of Columbia being able to get electoral colleges votes and vice president vote and president vote, which meant like the whole number of senators and representatives in the Congress to which the district would be entitled to if they were a state, they would get that. But in no event were they the least populous state. So in layman's terms, basically, they got three electors still with over 700,000 residents in DC. They're still unable to vote in presidential elections. I'm sorry, they're able to vote in presidential elections, but they have no voting representation in Congress. So that controls the Congress controls the veto power. So they don't have any representation to be able to veto power. And many of the decisions related to the district that would be decided by the local control in the state. So they have basically taxation without representation. We talked about that, considering people who may have records that include felonies, not being able to vote, but still they have to pay taxes, right? So yeah, so that's a little history for DC. 64 years ago, they did get at least that, right? Okay, that's good. Also, if you guys aren't aware, I know a lot of people do the ancestry they determine to find out, where we come from, right? We all are very curious to find out, our origin as far as our, where our family's from, what continent, what bloodline we come from. And I haven't done that yet. Have any of you guys done it? I know a lot of people have. It's reported that millions of Americans have done it through 23andMe. And as some of you may be aware, maybe some of you aren't, they just filed bankruptcy. So, yeah. And so millions of Americans who have used the genetic testing firm 23andMe to trace their DNA are at risk of having their information shared with other companies. So the company is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection after selling a $30 million lawsuit in 2024 that triggered by a large data breach. So the CEO and Wojcicki, however you say that, has resigned effective immediately as well. So the company issued a statement saying it intends to continue operating this business as usual throughout the sales process. It said that there's no charges to the way the company stores, no changes to the way the company stores, manages, or protects the customer data. That's what they said, okay? However, they went on to add that Yeah, the 20 that they, will keep everything the same, but at the same time, a U.S. bankruptcy judge has ruled a DNA testing company that did file for bankruptcy is able to sell the data, so they can sell it to insurance companies, um, uh, banks, and it is up for bid. So real soon, May 7th will be the final hearing to be held for offers for people who want to collect data. So if you guys want to get your information off. I can't guarantee, nothing is for certain, but they're saying that you can have your information deleted from 23andMe. And the way to do that is by logging into 23andMe into your account on their website. Go to the settings section of your profile, scroll to the section labeled 23andMe data at the bottom of the page, and then click on view next to 23andMe data. So download your data so you'll have it just for your reference. And then if you want a copy of your genetic data for personal storage, choose the option to download it to your device before proceeding. So yeah, make sure to download it if you want a copy of it. And then scroll to the delete data section. And then you can click permanently delete data and confirm your request. You'll receive an email from 23andMe. Yeah. And then you just follow the link in the email to confirm your deletion request. I haven't done that. I'm kind of like, I feel a certain type of way given my DNA, even though I did, I do feel like it's a moot point because I feel like they have what they need from us. I mean, we get our blood taken. I don't know what it takes, how they would collect the DNA, but I just feel like they already have that. And so maybe this is easily accessible. Maybe it's more thorough or detailed, but I just feel like they already have this information. But there is a Black-owned ancestry, AfricanAncestry.com, that if you're still interested in learning more about your ancestry, you can go there, and they do discard the data after they provide the results to you. So that's the difference between them and 23andMe if you're just interested in that, And so, I'm already started, right? But let me go ahead and share this video because I haven't done it. And I want to encourage you all too to hit the like button, to share. Be sure to comment. Please be in the chat, sharing your thoughts and opinions. Tell a friend. Again, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube page at In Your Ear Radio. And again, I got to go ahead and share this video because sometimes I just forget. And so let's just do that now. I'm going to share this properly. And I have done so. And let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have shared the video. So for those of you who are in my group, you can have access to viewing it with us as well. Let's get into a little bit of politics. There's politics around here. Y'all know what it is. And it's so much going on. It's hard to keep up. And a lot of stuff, do we really want to talk about it? There's so many distractions going on in the world, and a lot of it is being brought to us by this current administration. And I think it's intentional. That's what's scary to me, is that when people are continuously just bombarding you with distraction, that means that they want you to look the other way because there's some real shiz not e going on. Shout out to Lil Scrappy. It's some real stuff going on. And so we have to be aware of that and not get too caught up in every little thing that's being brought to our attention, because every little thing is, not that big. And so, so we have to cherry pick what's important to us and what's, what we need to focus on, and then, be able to throw out the others. They call it chewing up the meat and spitting out the bones. But before we get into it, I'm going to add a little levity to the conversation. I was listening to a comedian. I don't know who he is, but he had something to say about politics, as I call it, but politics in general, because I know talking to a lot of people, again, we get overwhelmed, right? Talking about politics, people that do tune into me, I'm sure you know what to expect if you new to this page. We definitely center conversations around politics, because not that I started off wanting that to be the focal point of this platform, but the things that I talk about which are mostly related to social justice and health, wellness, and just life in general, all ties into politics, because some of these changes and things that affect us, again, be it health, be it social justice issues, incarceration, just day-to-day life, it's affected by the people that we vote into office. It's affected on how we vote. It's affected on us being aware and being active in making change. So it's not just enough to just talk about it. We have to actually outline the details as to how do we get here and what does it What is it that we can do to bring about change? And then be aware of those people who are doing the good and doing the bad. So it's all tied in together. So it's hard for me to not talk about politics, but as I talk about the things that I feel are very important to be discussed. But here is a comedian who's kind of like joking about the fact that, how people don't want to talk about politics.
Some people don't want to talk about politics. They're like, NATO, why do you got to talk about politics? What do politics have to do with me? I'm not an immigrant or a black person or a Muslim or a Jew or a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender or a woman or an old person or a young person or a student or a union member or artist or journalist or scientist or public employee. I don't breathe the air or drink the water. I don't live in a coastal region that be affected by sea level rise or an arid region that be affected by drought or fire. I don't like chocolate, wine, or coffee or other commodities that will no longer be available due to climate change. I'm not mentally ill, pregnant, disabled, or currently being shot at, so... What do politics have to do with me? Some people...
And that's the thought process of a lot of people here in the United States when it comes to politics. When everything that he mentioned, one of us, we all can relate to one of those subject matters. If it's your health, it's your height, it's your age, it's police violence, it's one of those things matter to you, and it's all tied into politics. And I just thought it was a funny way to look at it, because when you hear people say, I don't really discuss politics, your life is about politics. I mean, when you get into the political aspect of it, when we talk about parties, when people start banging Democrat, Republican, Independent, then it becomes something else. But overall, the life that we live, the lifestyle, the taxes we pay, the way we're treated, with jobs, all of these things are tied into voting, who's in office, who's writing these laws and making the changes. So it is about politics here in the United States of America. So just to let you know, and I call it politics because there's a lot of games being played, for sure. We know that for sure. So just so you guys know, they are snatching up protesters. And, we talked about this before the election, reiterated that, I know, on my platform and many other platforms, trying to encourage people to vote because, we were, steadfast talking about the immigration, even though a lot of us are, we were born here. So that was, again, wasn't something that we were necessarily concerned about, right? Because, hey, I was born here. And now we're seeing that people who were born here are being gaffled up because they appear to be foreign. I mean, what does a foreigner look like? You know what I'm saying? Because this is a melting pot. All different nationalities, ethnicities, races are born here on this continent. And so that is the excuse they're using now. The immigration laws that they've, went full throttle with, they're using these now. They're using this now to go after everybody. And again, that was something that was just emphasized strongly before the election, because yeah, you might not care. You might say, yeah, I want Mexicans to go back to Mexico and Haitians to go back to Haiti. And nobody was really worried about white skinned people. I never heard anybody telling people to go back to Ireland or other places of the nature of Europe, but just brown skinned people. But now we see that, again, people who are actually born here are being affected, and they're using excuses, for people who, you just look that way. And here's the thing. Yeah, you can walk around with your birth certificate. You can walk around with your passport. For those who have one, you can walk around with your social security card, but they can still detain you. What are you going to do? You have to sit there and go through the so-called due process, and hopefully it won't take long before you return back to your family. But most of the people that I'm hearing about being detained that are U.S. citizens are still detained. Okay. So this was the kind of things that, people like myself were just trying to press to people, just with the urgency and importance of just voting to make sure that at least this person that we have as a president, y'all's president, wouldn't be president. And, I understand you have to have that, that vote that, just on principle, but principle wasn't going to get the person that you were electing in. Some people wrote in their name. Some people voted for someone who didn't have a chance to win. Jill Stein and what's the other black guy with the fro, whatever. Anyway, so they played the game, and you play stupid games and you win stupid prizes. I'm just saying.com. But in other news, somebody who stays in the news, I know you guys know we have a great representative, Texas, Jasmine Crockett, along with MGT, they stay beefing. And if you guys don't know the history of them, I just kind of caught wind of, I've been watching MGT because she's a conspiracy theorist. She's just wild. She's like your Fox News poster child, but she represents the Georgia 14th Congressional District. And then you have Jasmine Crockett, who's a lawyer politician who's represents the Texas 30th Congressional District out of Dallas. But they go back and forth. But again, the history of them was beach, blonde, bad, built, butch body when she went in on that, because of course she was going in on her lashes and things like that. Very unprofessional. These people again are sitting in here, writing laws, passing bills, voting on our lives, our future, our money. And these are the kind of conversations they're having. Can you imagine sitting in a workplace, in a conference room, in a meeting, and having to go back and forth with somebody? But this is what they're dealing with. And it's not just in the United States. I watched the Whig parties in the UK, and they be scrapping, boy, it be knuckles. You know what I'm saying? So it's not foreign to this particular culture, I'll say. But yeah, so lately, MTG, which again is Marjorie Taylor Greene, she, if you guys aren't aware, that now they're trying to close down the Department of PBS, y'all, Sesame Street. They're trying to close down PBS, and they're trying to close down the NPR. They don't want to have to fund it anymore. And so they're working diligently. This is all part of the Project 2025. Remember, they're trying to suppress media. They only want media. The only media that they want us to have access to is media that supports their agenda, like a Fox News station, which isn't news. It's legally be allowed to be called news. But again, don't forget, they were actually sued for lying and being called a news station when they're not news. So they did have to come out and say that they are not news, that they're an entertainment station. And that's what all of our media is turning into. Cable news, MSNBC, CNN, it's turning into entertainment, because instead of being non-biased and just telling you what's happening in the world, giving you the perspectives from one side to the other, they're coming in with their opinions. They're coming in with their perspective, what they want you to know. And that's all you see and hear. So your perspective on what's happening in the world is built on what someone else is telling you, if you're not going above and beyond and doing the knowledge, going to independent stations or news resources such as PBS and NPR and other foreign agencies that report the news, not just necessarily what they want you to know, and propaganda. Propaganda is a big deal. But anyway, so with all of this, there's been a congressional hearing. Jasmine Crockett was president, and also Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she initially, before this whole meeting came apart, I just want to give you guys a taste of who this woman is if you haven't heard of her or know what she's about. She's very trailer-ish. I'm just going to say it. She's very trailer-ish. Definitely a DEI hire, because she did not earn it. She doesn't have the education or just, I could say a lot about her, but just to give you a perspective of this type of woman and how she represents her district and how she speaks to people and what her perspective is, I'm going to play a clip.
Some people don't want to talk about politics.
I'm going to play a clip,
like
excuse me, that she was speaking to a journalist that was from another country, basically telling her, the ladies here asking questions. And that's another thing you have to think about when these journalists are in the room from different countries and different states and different cities. You're getting different perspective. Just how we learn about what's happening around the world is because we have foreign journalists and we have local journalists who travel to get that information and bring it back to us. So it's no different here in the United States. That's what it's always been when we see these press conferences and the president and the representative, the House Speaker, and all of these people are present to answer questions from the press. This is what they're doing. They're answering questions so that these journalists can get the news back to their people. And so this is what was supposed to be happening here with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so I'm going to play that so you can hear how she spoke to this journalist who was asking her a question.
What country are you? Wait, what country are you from?
The UK.
Okay, we don't give a about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem? And you no. You should care about your own borders.
Do you care about American lives?
No. Let me tell you something. Do you care about people from your country? What about all the women that are raped by migrants?
Do you care
No, do you care? Okay, you're done.
Do you care about American lives being put at risk?
You know what? I don't.
Members fighting for your country.
I don't care about your fake news. Do you have a relevant question? Yeah, this is an American journalist. Thank you.
I'm an American, and I'd like to hear your answer to what she's asking.
I'm not answering her question because I don't care about her network. If you would like to ask, I can answer.
Do you have any concerns whatsoever about the complete disregard of operational security from?
So she was asking a question in reference to all of the changes that are being made or proposed to be made with taking away, funding for NPR and PBS. And she was like, go back to your country. I'm not answering your question. Worry about your country. Like, the hell? The people want to know, what is your perspective? And so an American journalist said, hey, well, I'm American. I want you to answer her question. And she was like, yeah, I'll answer your question, but I'm not answering hers. So in essence, you're going to answer the question, but not if it's someone that's not an American. This is what we're dealing with. Like this president of yours, has emboldened these people to just be just totally disrespectful, ignorant, and they off the charts. They off the chart. And then you hear these people talking about going back to their country or whatever. Where's MGT going to go back to? Because this isn't her native land. I'm quite sure. I'm willing to bet that I'll put my money on 23andMe or AfricanAncestry.com. This is not her land. This is not her land. This is not where her ancestors came from. She looks like some of the people who came over here and raped and stole and just wiped out the natives that were here. She looks like she comes from that. But this is what we're dealing with. And this is a representative, you guys. She was voted in. And she may continue to have that seat. I don't know exactly when her seat is up, but she was literally voted in. So people are supporting her. And this is how she's treating people. Her only interest is in what they would like to think as being supreme, being white. You know what I'm saying? That's the only thing that she's interested in. And the sad part about it is like it's a Handmaid's Tale thing, because even if it comes down to, total oppression and having no rights and media being totally suppressed and people just being pushed to the bottom and not having access to income and Social Security and just being ruled over by these evil people, she will be one of them too. This is what the FAFO is all about. All of these people who are trying to protect their whiteness are learning that it's not even about that. They just used you. Like I said, they used you as a stepping stone. And when they was through, they sent you home. They fired you. They sent you home. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't care. And so that's how she's talking to people in regards to this. And again, this is all on the heels of y'all's president urging that they not fund, the defund NPR and PBS. And this is him saying, yeah, he wants it over. He said NPR and PBS are two horrible and completely biased platforms, networks, should be defunded by Congress immediately. At least he had enough sense to say by Congress. So because we know, as we hear him speak, he talks like a dictator. He just wants executive order, tell people what to do, and nobody's doing the checks and balances, getting with the Congress and then the Senate and passing bills. So it was interesting to hear him say that in a quote. He went on to say, Republicans don't miss this opportunity to rid our country of this giant scam, both being arms of the radical left, Democratic Party. Just say no and make America great again. Again, he just wants to dismantle or defund NPR and PBS, which means they have to come up with their own funding to give us information that is not biased, that's non-propaganda information. So this is where we're at. But again, Representative Jasmine Crockett clapped back. She was in a GOP meeting representing the NPR and PBS and spoke about this and what the agenda is. And I'll bring that information to you. Here's another clip before we get into this, Pastor, because look, I never would have paid it. I'm just telling you that now. But yeah, I want to play this clip for you as well with Jasmine Crockett giving her 2 cents on what y'all's president is trying to do. And let me just push play. So yeah, so she's gonna give her 2 cents, and we'll start it over because this always happens.
At the expense of the safety of the American people, particularly Americans living in rural or remote parts of the country. They don't care about public safety. They don't care about emergency management, and they don't care about free speech, all of which are harming American people. In fact, I'm gonna skip off real quick because they have tried to come for you, Ms. Mayor. And I just want to clarify, you did not work for NPR when those statements were made, did you?
That is correct, Madam.
And to be clear, free speech is not about whatever it is that y'all want somebody to say. And the idea that you want to shut down everybody that is not Fox News is bullshit. We need to stop playing because that's what y'all are doing in here. You don't want to hear the opinions of anybody else. And the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman's time.
So she's just basically clapping back because, again, y'all's president wants to close down these media platforms that are telling the truth, that are providing information to the masses, to those who want to be informed. If they're talking about things that he doesn't want them to talk about that reflect him negatively, he doesn't want them to have access to our tax dollars, because it's our tax dollars that are funneled into these institutions that provide this information to us. So this is what we're dealing with. When we talked about a dictatorship, when we talked about comparing him to Hitler, and just people understanding what was at stake and not being, distracted by race, not being distracted by immigration, not being distracted by sexuality, trends, and things of that nature, because those are not things that they care about. What they care about is power and oppression and money. And so those are the tools they use because they know it works for some people. You dangle a shiny object in front of folks and they go for what glitters. But everything that glitters ain't gold, y'all. Some of that stuff is fake. You wash it off, you take a shower, and then now you mad. A lot of y'all FAFOs are finding out, right? Y'all done took a shower with that fake gold and now you mad because your neck green. Listen, that's on you. And shout out to Attorney General Aaron Ford, who's also in the process of suing y'all's president due to him wanting to dismantle the Department of Education. So yeah, this is wild. It's just sad that we're at this point, but thanks to the governor, Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo, defended y'all's president's plans to close the longstanding federal department and return, quote, power over education to families instead of bureaucracies, unquote. So, okay, yeah, all right. So our current governor here in Nevada is Joe Lombardo. He does support dismantling the Department of Education. The Attorney General of Nevada is saying, no, this is not a good look. And that he's fighting to protect the people. Again, our tax dollars are put into these programs. Now, I know people have their opinions about it, and I get it. The educational system isn't what it could be. If you look at where we're rated on the charts of education, it's low here in Nevada, and we aren't educating our kids in a way that we should. And again, we're not giving them truthful information, but what they're trying to do literally is make sure that this country is dumb us down to the lowest denominator so they can continue to control the people, control the masses. So, everybody doesn't have access to education. Every parent can't teach their kid from home. There's just so many different things that entail education that we can't just allow them to have that control. Yes, we need to have control of it. Yes, we need to tweak it. Yes, we need to improve it, but we don't want them taking these things away from our children. We have to think about the future. It was created. The Department of Education was created by an act of Congress in 1979 under President Jimmy Carter, and it coordinates the federal assistance to education, assists the president in executing his education policies and implementing laws enacted by Congress. So, I have my thoughts and feelings about the educational system, but I don't want this man and his administration having their hands in any changes that will affect our future and the future of our children. I don't trust them. I know that they don't have good intentions. And so that is a concern to me. Okay. All right, y'all. We about to get into it because this has been wild out here. It's been wild out here, right? Listen, I never would have paid it. I'm just saying. So let me go ahead and get my Wendy Williams on before I get into this and sip my tea. So I wanted to make a disclaimer before I even get started, because I know a hit dog will holler. I get it. But what we're about to talk about has to do with the bad guys. I know there are some very great pastors and ministries doing great, honest work. They're doing the Lord's work. I know that. And I'm grateful for them being in a position and doing righteous things for the community and for the country. I'm not talking about y'all, but we are talking about the other people because they are effective as well, and in a negative way. Okay, so I'm not talking about the good people out there, and I don't want you guys to feel like that I'm wagging my finger at Christianity or pastors and the ministry overall. But this is a conversation that needs to be had. We talk about this all the time at the kitchen table. We talk about this. And so, yeah, it was a very interesting conversation for me to have with you all, that I wanted to have with you all. So I hope that you will join me in the chat, Facebook and YouTube. Thank you so much. And always shout out to GB, who's always first in the chat. Love and appreciate you for it. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe, blah, 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 all of the good stuff. Okay. But anyways, if you guys are not familiar with the preacher, he's a pastor and he's also a gospel singer, Pastor Marvin Sapp. Went before his congregation, or not his, but a congregation, as a, I guess he's a fundraiser as well, and asked him for 40,000. He sure did. He asked him for 40,000. So, it was just funny. I was just listening to all of the comments, reading the comments. A lot of people were leading with never would have paid it. So I think, like minds, some of us like-minded people, we kind of had the same thought, because, he has a song called Never Would Have Made It. And so, yeah. So I just thought it was funny. It was just so many different funny memes about this, and people just saying, just remixing remixing his song, and just saying, like, a lot of people were mad. I can't recall anything that was necessarily in his defense, particularly just to say that this happens in the church. This is what they do. But overall, it was, I'm not listening to your music anymore. Because he said, lock the doors and ain't nobody leave until I get $20 from everybody. And if you in the pulpit, I need what do you say, 100 from y'all. And so it was just a lot of conversation and people just really feeling away and then venting about their experience in the church. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about, what it is, what's this whole thing about raising money, how we feel about the church environment. Are people still going to church, and why, if they're not? Like I said, I heard somebody tell me, they told me that's why people don't go to church no more, because they can't afford it. And I thought that was just, that was hilarious. But this was a funny, I heard a lady, she's a, what do we call her? She's an influencer on Instagram. They call her Auntie Pam, if I'm not mistaken. And she's got her claim to fame because after people pass, she makes a phone call and she's recording live, talking to them, asking them about other people who may also be in heaven with them. And it's just a funny, lighthearted conversation she has, acting like she's talking to those who have transitioned. But in this case, she's actually talking to someone who's still here with us. And she called Marvin Sapp. And again, this is just I would say, a parody per se.
Hey there, who is this? Hey, Marvin Sapp. Yes, Auntie. How are you? Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. You know why Auntie calling, don't it? What make you get up there and pull them folks in there for their offering? I see you put a post out there after the video had done went viral, was trying to tell us what happened, Michael. But this here is why I say cut them cameras off in church. Because, see, people takes a small part of something and we takes it out of context. But what I saw now, you just tell me if I'm wrong. At the moment that video went out, I don't believe you thought that video was going to do what it did. Because I believe you was for real when you said it. But, today when you sent your reply out, you had them fixed it up and you done found a couple of scriptures to slap on it. But let me ask you this. What the $40,000 was going to pay for? Because that's a lot of money.
It's a lot.
I know the conference costs money and carrying on. But listen, what may help y'all out is just have it on Zoom next time. That way it won't have you going viral like that. Because Auntie don't like that. Yeah, never would have made it to social media if you hadn't had them cameras off. Well, Auntie still see the best in you when everybody else seeing the worst in you. I wanted to call and get some understanding, though. All right, Marvin, just stay off the internet till Easter. It'll die down. All right now, Mario. Bye-bye.
All right now, Mario. And so just to give you guys some context, if you haven't heard the video, he's talking to the congregation and he has some things to say, and I'll play that.
Take your phone and stick it on the bucket.
Let me start over to where he initially started.
The cost that is involved. There's 1,000 of you. I said, close them doors. Ushers, close the doors. Close the doors. Close the doors. We all gonna leave together. Y'all ain't going no place but to the restaurant.
Why he in their business?
There's 1,000 of you tonight, and those that are watching, it's 1,000 that's watching online. This is a small seed. If I get 1,000 online to give this, if I get 1,000 in the sanctuary to give this, that's $40,000 tonight. I'm challenging each of you all down here to give a $20 seed. I just think $20 is a lot of money. $20, believe it or not, when my late wife, Melinda P. Sapp, was alive, was a good date. I could take her to the movies, buy a box, and they understand popcorn, get 1 soda, 2 straws. I wasn't cheap, that's swag. I was looking in her eyes, she's looking in mine.
Give me
Can't do that no more. Now, everyone up here, we've all sowed and seeded, but I need everyone standing up here with us, with me, to plant a seed of $100. Because again, it costs to sit up
I'm
here.
looking at their face.
I got you. Let's see. So put your 20 away, preachers. That 20 wasn't for you. And this is what I need you to do. If you're giving electronically, or even if you're giving tangibly, I'm gonna have y'all come to the altar and give it, because I need to see 1,000 people moving. Bring them baskets. I want the baskets up here. I want to see the folk. Y'all start moving. Y'all can bring it right now. Come. Even if you're giving tangibly, just put your hand on the popcorn, get 1 soda, 2 straws. Take your phone and stick it on the bucket.
So he goes on again. He told the ushers to lock the door, and he said it, demanding that they lock the door and not allow anyone to leave the church. And my first thought was, isn't that like kidnapping and false imprisonment? Like, can't you get arrested for that? Like, where do they do that at? Like, I've been in churches to where, they start, it turns into something else. And I don't know if it's just a vibe. They just smell money. They be like, it's a whole lot of money in it, and then they just get lit. You know what I'm saying? Or if it's just something that's ceremonial that they do, because I don't go to church consistently, hardly ever. And I have my reasons. But when I do go and I experience this, it's like, okay, here we go with the hustle. Like, I would rather be in a church environment where, you pay your tithes, and then if there is an offering, you do that in silence. That should not be the highlight, because I feel like when you go to church, you're going there to hear the word, you're going there to get inspiration, you're going there to help get something healed. You're looking for the message from God. You're not there to pour out. A lot of people don't have money, and some people may even feel uncomfortable even going to the church, because they know that plate is going to go around and people are looking at them. And, so I'm just like, where do they do that at? Where do you just tell people lock the doors and you tell them they can't leave? As soon as he would have said lock the doors, listen, the way my PTSD is set up, child, I would have been like, yeah, I would have grabbed my purse, put up my church fingers, and I would have been out of there, and I would have went to the restaurant, okay? Because I spend my money how I choose to spend it, and not based on somebody, how I felt like he was trying to pimp them out of their money. I'm just keeping it 100. I just felt like he was just trying to pimp them out of their money. And I'm like, what were the intentions? Like, you know what I'm saying? At the same time, I'm looking on his social media, and he's on tour promoting trauma drama. And I'm like, don't you know that this is a part of trauma drama? Don't you see that? Don't you understand that this is what's happening right now? That you're traumatizing people, or you're re-traumatizing them? Because a lot of people who've been in the church, who've gone to the church, and stop going, it's because of things like this, because people hustling them out of their money. I know there's been relationships that have been destroyed because, for example, the wife may just be giving all the money. I've seen videos, and it was just funny just looking at video where the wife was giving up all the money, and the pastor will call him into the room and tell the husband, I know she told me you got a raise, you need to up your tithes. And just, people just being so committed to giving their money to the church and not maintaining their household and their marriages and things of that nature. So it's a sensitive topic for some people. But yeah, he has this whole trauma drama thing going on that he's touring. And some of the subject matters is, it says, reject the lie that you deserved this. And do not let suffering become your identity. And point 3 is break the silence, because healing begins in the light. Okay, so that's what he's touring on, trauma drama. And at the same time, he's raising money. I guess for the church, for himself. I don't know. You guys know more than I do. Please share. But that's what's going on with him. And then, I just feel like, there is a story in the Bible about ill-gotten goods. This means that you acquire something by illicit, meaning unlawful or immoral, or improper means. And sometimes, the way that he did it, locking people in a church and saying, everybody just pull out $20 or cash app $20, electronic transfer $20. To me, I don't think that's positive. I'm like, there's a time and a place for it. If you do need to raise money for the church, if you do need to raise money for a cause, it's just like with any other fundraiser. People do it all the time, like in every aspect of the profession, because I guess being a pastor is a profession. There's ways to raise money, but call it a fundraiser. If I pull up to a church, I'm there to hear the word, not for you to try to squeeze out every freaking dime I have in my pocketbook. So, I think it should be separate. If you need to raise $40,000, you should do a fundraiser. Maybe, make an exchange, provide goods and foods and services for people so that they can feel like they're being a cheerful giver, not just handing over money. And are you telling them what the money's for? Are you explaining to them why you're giving? Why are you requiring them again? Well, who locked the doors? Like, I'm telling you, that right there would have took me. That would have took me. Yeah. That would have took me. But I'm just thinking, like, if this is what you're doing on behalf of the church, and the church is supposed to be a representative of God and the teachings of Jesus, what would Jesus do? Do you think Jesus would say, lock the doors, and nobody's leaving until everybody give $20? Like, Jesus fed thousands of people with a couple of fish. Jesus didn't ask anybody for anything. He went around telling people how to be better in life, how to, be fruitful, and how to treat people. He didn't get into all of the things that the church gets into, your sexuality. He got into treating people how you want to be treated, loving your neighbor, helping, being of service to people. I don't remember him hustling for money, but I also remember him being mad because there was an institution, that there was a building where people had to enter in order to so-called worship God. And again, I'm not mad about it. Everybody needs a place to come to, right? Like, some of us need this sanctuary, which is supposed to be a sanctuary, and some of us maybe not. But I'm not mad about that. But when you think about the Christianity, and they are speaking on the teachings of Jesus, the whole premise of having a church was against what Jesus wanted. And then you turn around and now you hitting people up for money. So I'm just like, what would Jesus do? And he went on to say that God loved a cheerful giver, and I'm like, okay. So he quoted Corinthians, or at least I'm saying that maybe that's where he was coming from, Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. And each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So I think he went against everything that he may have been quoting when he said God loves a cheerful giver. Like, really. And then there's also a message about people who don't give in a cheerful way. So it's the opposite, of having a bountiful reap. You're going to have the opposite. So if you're doing something in distress, or if you're a hostile giver, then it's not going to manifest in a beneficial way. So why would you want people to just feel like, oh, I'm mad, I'm getting up out of here? Get that man $20 so we can go. I'm trying to get to the Waffle House. I'm trying to get to Grits Cafe. I'm trying to get up out of here. Get that man $20. And so is that what the money that you want to transfer from one hand to another? Because that's not a cheerful giver. That's a person who might have a hardened heart and just be upset and just want to get up out of here and don't want no problem. So are you really practicing what you preach? Do you really understand the message that you're giving to people when you say things and then expect them to respond in a way? Because he didn't say, for those of you who don't feel, positivity in your heart and feel the need to be a cheerful giver, y'all can leave. But for the rest of y'all, let's lock the doors and squeeze $20 out of you and $100 for y'all in the pulpit. That's not what he said. He said, ain't nobody leaving until y'all get $20. It's 1,000 of y'all. We need to get $40,000. And again, he added that, God loves a cheerful giver. How you going to be cheerful if somebody locking you in a place? I'm just saying, if somebody locking you in a place and demanding money from you, that's all I'm saying. So, there was a man, if you guys don't remember, he did the opposite of what Marvin Sapp did. When the money was about to leave the church, if y'all don't remember, He told everybody to leave. Y'all remember that story back in 2022? It was a Brooklyn bishop, Lamar Whitehead, bling bling. You know what I'm saying? And his wife, they were robbed live. It was live on the internet when some guys came in there and stole all their jewelry. You know, he estimated it was $1 million in jewelry. You at church preaching to the people, and somebody comes into the church and takes $1 million worth of jewelry. Again, this is supposed to be you preaching the Lord's word, preaching the teachings that Jesus said. I don't think none of this lines up with Jesus. That's all I'm saying.com. Y'all can tweet that. None of this lines up with Jesus. But again, this man, Lamar Whitehead, he said, when I saw them come into the sanctuary with their guns, I told everybody to get out. Okay. So there's a thing going on here. When you want them to stay, you lock the doors. When you want them to leave, you tell them to get out. So you want them to stay when you want to get their money. But when they taking your money, you tell them to get out. I got it. So he did. That's what he said. He told everybody to get out. He said he didn't know if they wanted to shoot up the church or if they were just coming for the robbery. So yeah, that's what had happened. And later on, after this incident, the same pastor of this church was arrested on federal charges for allegedly defrauding a parishioner, trying to extort a businessman and lying to the FBI. And this is according to a federal indictment. He's facing like 65 years. So he has several charges. Again, this is a pastor. This is a pastor of a church. Okay, so my question is, are churches turning into more of a business than it is a sanctuary? Even when I think about mega churches, right? Like all of these people in this church, like all of that money they're collecting, all of the cost it is to maintain it, because they're saying it's like, you know, the rent or the mortgage for having an institution like that so large with a mega church with thousands of people. And you got different, you know, income classes there, right? You got the rich, you got the middle class, you got the poor. And you're collecting money from all of them. And to maintain a building like that alone, maybe $30,000, $50,000. And then you have to think about all the other programs that you're implementing. And then, of course, you know, the pastor gets paid as well, and other people, I'm sure. And so it's just crazy to me. It's just really, really crazy to me when I think about how people are raising money in the name of the Lord. What do you guys think about that? Like, should there be a line drawn as to, you know, asking for money, how much money you ask for? Where do we draw the line? Shout out to Hot 702 FM. Yeah, I mean, where do we draw the line? You know, when I think about the church, you know, I look at the church as a sanctuary and a refuge. Like a sanctuary meaning it's a holy place designed for worship, prayer, seeking refuge in God's presence and protection. That's how I see the church. You know, so I don't expect to go into a church and see a pastor blinged out. You can have, nobody's mad about, I mean, that's your business. If you have expensive jewelry and expensive cars and expensive clothes and a big house, but there are people in there that are struggling, that are literally coming there for the grape juice, y'all, the so-called fake wine, the grape juice, and the crackers, because that's all they're going to eat. And yeah, I'm being a little facetious, but also being real. In real life, some people are really coming and that's all they're going to eat. That Sunday meal that y'all might have, a fish fry, whatever it is. And here you are blinged out. You got the finest car, you pulling up in a Rolls Royce, and then you look in the parking lot and everybody else is just, you know, if mediocre. You know, people coming in there trying to be in their Sunday best, and it ain't, you know, up to par, but you blinged out and you got this big old house and you making all this money preaching about the word of God. Like, I think somewhere along the lines of talking about God, it's a level of humbleness to it. Like, you coming in front of people like that and flashing and then asking them for money. Well, you better sell some of that jewelry or something. I'm sure Marvin Sapp got $40,000 worth of something that he could have donated to whatever he was raising funds for, to himself, to the church, to the other ministers, whatever it was. He could have just gave that money and went on about his life in silence. You don't even have to be public about those type of things. So yeah, I look at the church as a sanctuary, you know, and then there within the Christian church, you have tithes. So there, you know, for people who are members, they commit to giving 10% of their income or resources to a church or a religious community based on the Old and New Testament. And these tithes were historically required payments, often in the form, you know, dating back to biblical times. It was given in the form of agriculture, produce, or to support local churches and clergy. and general, just voluntary stuff. And they said it's under Mosaic law that it's not necessarily voluntary, that if you are a member of the church under Mosaic law, that's what you're supposed to be doing. But my thing is, if you don't have it, then what? And I've been in those churches where sister so-and-so ain't paying her tithes, and so-and-so, her husband got a gambling problem and they ain't paying their tithes. And like, people are really coming there for refuge. They're really coming there for peace, for healing. And this is why, you hear people say that your pastor is not your counselor. Your pastor is not your therapist, because a lot of people use the church thinking that they can be healed from any mental conditions they're having, any issues they're having in a home they want to be relieved of. Maybe the church can provide financial relief, and a lot of churches do. So a lot of the money that they're raising from tithes and people taking offerings, which is, if you don't know, that's when they pass around a plate, hopefully people ain't taking it out. Now I'm being silly, but passing the plate around, and that's another way that they raise money as well. But these things are not just for the salary for the pastor. It is to maintain the overhead, and then of course you're supposed to be of service to the community. So I understand you needing that money to do those things, but just to lock people into a room and say, "Give me 40,000, you got $20." I don't understand that. Just do a regular fundraiser. Don't make people feel uncomfortable about going to church, because the whole spirit and element of being in that environment is to be at peace and to praise and worship God and to have some type of, solace and just peace of mind. And so if you're in there thinking, damn, he want $20, I ain't got it, or that's not what I came here for, or I don't want to give it, now your whole energy is shifted. And then he telling me I can't leave. Child. Like, yeah, that all, I don't know how you explain yourself when it comes to that. But in his defense, he did make a statement, and I'll read that. He said in the statement on his Facebook page, this was Wednesday, Marvin Sapp said, he wanted to provide additional context behind the request for money. He said that as a minister, fundraising was part of his job at the international convention. So I guess this was an international convention. So it wasn't a church event. I don't know, because I'm thinking if it was an international convention, I've never been to a church convention, but I know, there's lots goes on there, right? There's music, there's entertainment, there's worship, there's praise, there's, vendors and things of that nature. So I'm familiar with it, so I can understand that. But yeah, I'm still it's supposed to be in the name of the Lord. So he said that as a minister, again, fundraising was a part of his international convention, calling it a stewardship rather than manipulation. So he said it's a stewardship rather than manipulation. He said some have taken issue with a particular moment when I instructed the ushers rather firmly to close the doors during the offering. He also wrote, to those unfamiliar with the church context or who may not regularly attend the worship gatherings, this has been misinterpreted as holding people hostage as well as offensive. Child, you said it. You the one who said lock the doors, ain't nobody leaving. In any other, if I was at somebody's house and they said lock the doors, ain't nobody leaving, that would be considered kidnapping and false imprisonment. And there will be charges and somebody might go to jail. What's the difference? You can't be using the Lord to do your dirty work. That's all I'm saying.com. So he continued to say that finances are being received in any worship gathering. Okay, so it was a worship gathering. So I was trying to help you out, thinking it was just maybe a conference or convention. But like I said, this is y'all gather in the name of the Lord, period. Okay, so yeah, he said money is always, finances are being received in any worship gathering, and that it is one of the most vulnerable and exposed times for both the finance and the security teams. Ooh, security teams, wow. Security, imagine that, in the house of the Lord, you got to have security. These are the times we're living in. That's why I say, is the church becoming a business or is it a sanctuary? Which one is it? Which one is it? Because this is a place that we're supposed to be able to come and have peace. And we know that that's not necessarily the case, even when we have honest people who are there literally to praise the Lord. I remember the 9 victims who were shot and killed doing worship. It wasn't a packed house. It was those who were there to gather in the name of the Lord. Lives were taken. And so I understand the protection and security aspect of it, but the money grab, yeah. So yeah, to me, it could be seen as ill-gotten goods. Again, when you're getting something and it's not for good intentions. It's not for good intentions, and it's just something to consider. Yeah, so I understand like I said, with the overhead and things of that nature. Churches do a lot of positive things. They feed the poor, they provide education, jobs, resources, community programs. They're needed in the community. Black churches have also been in the forefront of providing social services to their communities and organizing political action. That's where the church was built off of, just organizing political action. Because there was a time in history here in the United States of America where that was the only time that we could actually come together as a Black people, in groups, and that we utilized that time to not only, praise the Lord and worship God, but also to organize, because people were trying to rebel against being enslaved. So, you saw that during the civil rights movement. Again, we had Dr. Martin Luther King, who was also a pastor, who fought on the behalf of the people in the 1950s and 60s. So we understand that. But these pastors, this is a job for them too. They do make a salary, and I'm not saying they shouldn't make one, but the reality is that they do get paid to speak. And again, before I understood that, before I knew that as a child, I didn't think that a pastor would get paid. But once I realized they did, I understood why. Because yeah, if that's all you're doing in life, then yeah, maybe you need to be able to take care of your house and home. But you have people such as activists, Malcolm X, even Dr. Martin Luther King. Once they passed, particularly Malcolm X, they didn't have any funding. Their family was left without. So they belonged to an institution, the Nation of Islam, in that case, Malcolm X, where he fought on the behalf of the people. He fought on behalf of the Nation of Islam. And when he was killed, when he was murdered, his family was left to fend for themselves. So, sometimes these people are raising this money, and then what? What are they doing with the money? I remember hearing a story about a man who said he was an only child, and his mother was a local here in the church. She gave her tithe, she gave extra money, and I want to say she was living in the underworld, so she was giving them, ill-gotten goods per se, but she was contributing to the church for whatever reasons. She contributed. They took her money. They they took her money, but then she passed away, sadly, and he was left as an only child alone to figure out how to bury his mom. So after all she had contributed to that church, the church did not stand up to help support his mother, who had contributed to that church. So, you think about situations like that. And again, these pastors make, on average, statistically, they're making anywhere up to $50,000. That's equates to maybe $21 to $33 an hour. And that's just for a small church. So for 500 or less, you're looking at, a salary being a pastor about 50,000. Then when you get into over 500, maybe 75 to 96,000 a year salary. And then a large church, 1,200 or more, you're looking at even more, even in the millions and some, but 100 and something thousand or more, I would say, because the millions equates from investments and other things they may have going on with the church. But some of these pastors are making decent salaries. And And I was reading an article in ZipRecruiter. They identified that the 15 states that were typical salaries for the pastors job is above the national average. There are 15 states, in the country that are above the national average. Nevada was not one of them. It was Washington. It was the District of Columbia. New York was close behind, and then second and third. So the New York beat the national average by 9.4%, and Washington furthers that trend with another 13% above average. So they're making money. It's an income. It could be a side hustle for those who are just in it for earnings. You know what I'm saying? Who are not really doing God's will and God's work. So it's just something to consider. When I used to look at pastors, I automatically looked at them as being anointed, being God-like, the closest to God, because I felt like they were holy. But then understanding what holy meant, it means not mixed, diluted, or tampered with. So can they really be holy? No, no man is holy. No man is without sin. And a lot of them, as I learned later on in life, a lot of these people come from the gutter, per se. maybe prior prostitution, major drug addiction, violence, just all kind of things. And for whatever reason, their lives have changed, and that's respectful. And that Bible spoke to them, and maybe the Lord spoke to them and told them they needed to speak to the people. But when you hustling people for money in the church and not just going out doing God's work, which is making sure the word gets to those who need it, yeah, I'm looking at you sideways. I got a side eye for you. You know what I'm saying? So I think that people who decide to become pastors and preachers need to be anointed. They just shouldn't just sign up for this, go to school, get an education, and say this is the realm they want to be in, teaching the word of God. It's got to come from your heart. God's wisdom has to come from your heart and your spirit. We don't need no Jim Joneses out here. You know what I'm saying? You have people drinking a Kool-Aid. So you have a lot of people who supposedly were sinners and now they turn to saints. Are there really any saints? Can anybody be perfect? We got Catholic priests right now. I mean, nobody's looking at them, but they touching the hell out of boys and molesting people, violating people, and their people are kissing their hands and praising them and looking at them like they something special. You got people that go into these confession rooms in the Catholic Church to confess their sins to a man. Okay. And what happens after then? They walk away and they think it's all good. Yeah, it's a lie, and I just think about the history of the pastor, in the slave community, when those of us who were in our families were enslaved. The preacher arose as someone who could join the slave community with God and stand in the gap against the master in a certain sort of way. And this is according to an article I was reading, a quote from Anthea Butler, an associate professor of religion of the University of Rochester. She said, post-slavery, we see the preacher as being the figure that's the one way in which an uneducated or educated African-American man can rise to power. You think about these mega churches. You think about these people nowadays. I'm not saying they're not dropping jewels. I mean, really, anybody can do that. You think about the best pimps, and you think about some of the best pimps. They got real good game. You know what I'm saying? And so we have people in these positions that don't mean good, are literally there because they're great orators. And they know how to get the people riled up. It's like going into a club and hearing a good song, and now the vibe is up and you have your libations and you having a good time. Well, we have people who are in positions as pastors and ministers who have that same effect for people who enjoy going to church. They get that vibe going for them and they collect all this money and they live well. And you have people like the Brooklyn pastor who comes to the church blinged out, rubbing it in your face how he doing good while he's stealing your money. And so those are the people that I'm talking about. So, and again, like I said, I heard somebody say that's why some people don't go to church, because they can't afford it. You know what I'm saying? Some people can't afford to give 10% of their income. You know what I'm saying? Some people can't afford to pay to pay in the offering. They're literally there looking for refuge. They're coming to the church as a sanctuary. They're coming for help. It's no different from someone who goes to the Salvation Army. Is Salvation Army charging people to enter the building? Are they saying, yeah, we can help you, but we need 10%? Is the Salvation Army saying, hey, we're going to do this for you, but you have to pay a certain amount of money to us as well? Like, no, they're just there to be of service. They've collected money from people who may not be, in a position that they're in, maybe more fortunate than them, to be able to help others, not to charge them for helping them. And that's how I look at it sometimes when I think about the church, because again, you have people who do contribute or may not be able to contribute, but really show up to hear the word and are not being supported in a way that they need to be supported, while you got people riding around in Rolls Royces and Bentleys and things of that nature. So the other thing is the attendance is decreasing. More people are watching on the internet because of reasons that we can get into. If you guys are raised in a church and now you don't attend church, and if you do attend church, are you going to are you attending church on the internet? Or are you going into the building? Or are you going regularly? Growing up, I had a grandmother. She made sure we was in church at least 3 times a week. We had Wednesdays, was Bible study. We had Sundays, just our regular church. And I say 3 days because Sunday was like 2 days by itself, because we were there from sun up to sundown all day in praise and worship, because she was a pastor. And so we would spend the entire day in church. So I don't know, are you guys still taking your kids to church? And So it has reduced. According to Black Enterprise, in-person worship among adults has decreased by 12%. This is a report given in 2024. And if more people stop going to Black churches, preachers are unsure how they will be able to continue their programming. So that's an issue as well. So maybe, you know, how are they filling up these mega churches? Are people going because of the word? I don't listen to any mega pastor. I see the clips and listen to what they have to say, but I have a biased mind. I'm kind of look side-eyeing you just because you're a mega church pastor. I'm kind of feeling a certain way. Like, would you have done this in front of 50 people? Like, would you have accepted the job if it were just 50 people and your salary was only 50,000? Or did you come to this church because the offering was $100,000+ in front of thousands of people? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when it's a money thing, we're talking about God. Money and God shouldn't go together. Again, if the Bible says that money is the root of all evil, why are pastors always asking for it? You know what I'm saying? So there was some quote that said, the future does not look good for organized religion in Black America, especially the historic traditions. So this was said by Jason E. Shelton, a sociologist and professor and director of the Center of African American Studies at the University of Texas in Arlington. He also said that Baptists are still the largest, but they're losing people. The Methodists are really down small, and the Pentecostals are losing, but they're not losing nearly as many since they've always been small. So it is changing. And I wonder why. What is causing the change in people attending church? I mean, if we go back to a time where the Black man and woman didn't have those freedoms, we can see why the churches would be packed, because that was our only refuge. People always, would say, when we go to church on Sunday, we dress up. The history, everything is embedded in history. We dress up because that was the only time we were allowed to get, dressed up. So it was always our Sunday best. This was a day that we could floss and, put on a nice suit, put on a nice dress, and polish our shoes and not be in the mud, not, in the fields. We were just amongst our friends and family, like-minded people worshiping God and planning our exit. So that's why you still see that in the church, people dressing up in their Sunday best, because it's been a tradition. I think a lot of times we forget those traditions and why we do the things we do. We think we just pull up because we're just trying to show off. But no, it's come from a culture. It's in our DNA. It's something we've done. And if our ancestors or our grandparents and those who are still here that came before us aren't explaining to us why we are the way we are, then we don't understand it. So we call it something else. But all of that getting fashion and fabulous on a Sunday has a lot to do with our history and the culture here in the country. Again, not being able to get up and get dressed. And that was the only opportunity we had. So some people even lean towards Christianity because that was their only outlet. And I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way, because Christianity is from the continent of Africa, but we have a different thing going on here in the United States, where those who were enslaved got a slave Bible and were taught to obey their masters. And it was just a different outlook. And I compared that to, I remember a gentleman telling me he was in the military, and after retiring, he smoked cigarettes still. And he said, you know why I started smoking? And I'm like, no, why? And he said, well, because in the military, if you smoke, you could take a break. So after all that marching and whatever they had to do throughout the day, those who didn't smoke had to continue on. But if you were a smoker, you could stop. So that would be his exit, to take a break. And so he developed a habit and continued smoking even afterwards. So, just thinking about people that attended church and maybe why it was so much of a big deal then it's starting to become now. But there's other reasons why people are falling back. Again, I was raised in a church, but I kind of just came into my own, just looking at the way that people behave as Christians in particular, and even in the Muslim community. And I realized that religion wasn't my jam. It was more about just understanding God's wisdom and learning the word, and just knowing the righteous path, versus having to conform to a certain way of dressing or eating, or just different things that I didn't necessarily think changed people. For some, yes, but for the most, people would still, look side eye at a person who may have a same-sex partner, but go home and eat the hog. And I'm like, in the Bible, it says nothing about same-sex, but it does say something about the hog. And here we are judging people. And so a lot of the conflicting things I got from just being in these institutions turned me away from it in that respect. So I'm not saying I wouldn't go finding a place to be in that, I feel like speaks to me. I would show up, but I don't know if that's for me. But again, I do love the Lord, and I'm a very spiritual person, and I know that there's something greater than me, definitely, for sure. So, but a lot of other reasons why people have fallen back from going to church is that it's not enough time. Remember, there was a time where there was, you had, you didn't need a 2-income household. Parents are working more, people are working more. There's disruptions with day-to-day life. People are taking care of family members. They have busy schedules. People are doing a lot, going to school, taking care of families, just not having that time. That's why, more people are gravitating towards internet for their church experience as well. And then again, there's bad experiences. And that's one of the main things that I'm hearing. The consensus is just having a bad experience in the church, feeling judged, not respected, not protected. And again, giving your money to an institution that doesn't support you in your time of need, having lost a loved one, not being there. And that, again, I'm not talking about the churches that do, because we know they're not all bad, but I'm talking about the ones that don't. Okay, those are the ones we're talking about today. Some people just have a personal disconnect. I think that was my thing. I just had a personal disconnect from the institution. Some people have a feeling of isolation. They're going through what they're going through. Again, the judgment factor, you know what I'm saying? And then sometimes it's just the community in itself, where the church is not open and welcoming to the community. And so that might deter people. The preference for privacy, especially men, right? Our brothers don't want to be going to church. The wives try to drag them to the church for the most part. And the brother's like, no. I don't want the pastor all in my business. You're going to tell him all our business. And he wants to counsel me. This man got his own issues, and he is not a therapist. Okay, I just added that. But a lot of times, people don't want people in their business. In churches, especially close-knit communities, they kind of share information, especially amongst women, and they like the privacy. And then there's a theological doubt or disagreement. So people may not agree with what they're being taught or what the word is. And that, to me, would be asking for $40,000, locking the doors, and saying you want $20 from each person. You know what I'm saying, .com? And again, the recognition of hypocrisy or dishonesty by the clergy, church failure. And we see that too. Again, there's no man that's holy. There's no man who does not sin. I don't care how well he does in life, how far away he strayed away from things he may not be doing that he did in the past. No one can be perfect. I think to be that, you would need to be divine. And the only divine thing in this world would be God, in my perspective. I just don't see how it could be any other way. So I get it, why people stray away, but this is definitely a reason for people to really stray away from the church. When you consider some of the negative things that happen. They call this a lock-in, and some people said they're familiar with, the lock-ins where they, I guess, hustle and take hustle and get money all day. I think they should call it a fundraiser. I don't think they should use God's name in order while they're raising money for the church. I don't think that is that's what's up. And I just wanted to put this shout out to GB. He said, "What up, family? Yep, let us congregate without the collection plate." He posted that earlier. But yeah, it definitely is what we doing here. It's a lot, you guys. And, when we think about lock-ins, which we know better as shut-ins, I remember those as well. Again, my grandmother, New Year's Eve, we would go to the church and we knew we would be there until at least midnight when the clock strike 12. And all I knew was that it was a shut-in. I knew there was going to be praise and worship food. We're going to be reading from the Bible, music. And I didn't know the history of it. And I didn't understand why we did it. And I'm pretty sure she understood, the historical, reasoning for it. But it was, at that time, it was just built around New Year's Eve. We go to a shut-in where we just, praise the Lord, worship, and do these things until the clock strike midnight. And then we head on home. But there is a history to that as well, us being shut in. And it wasn't just, to raise money, you know what I'm saying, to get $40,000 or $20 from each person and 100 from the pulpit. It was a Black American tradition that started in 1862. Um, in the Black community, we do continue to practice today, as I stated, but in the 1800s, before we were the Emancipation Proclamation took place, when we were aware that this was something that was going to go into effect, we waited for the announcement that would end slavery, and that news being the legislation of President Lincoln at that time, again, Emancipation Proclamation. Once he gave that executive order and slavery was ending, when he issued that order that slavery was ending, in September of that year, that would not take effect until January 1st of 1863. So people went into the church to hear that news and to be amongst each other. So people knew that on December 31st, 1862, that it would be a coming of a new day. They knew that. And so that's why they had a shut-in. They gathered together to be present together to hear this news. And so that's what the shut-ins were about then. And then even when they continued to have them, it was a place to congregate and, again, to discuss their next path. It was the Underground Railroad, per se, on what to do next, how to get up out of the conditions that they were in, out of the oppression they were in. So the church was used, again, for the things that I mentioned before, for resources, for the community, but it was more centered around the people, providing resources and information and freedom and refuge. And it was a sanctuary because our people love God and, believe. And it's a little different now. You don't hear the stories of them collecting money. Yes, they didn't have money then, per se, I'm sure. Again, with tithe, there was other ways of trade, but that wasn't what was centered. That wasn't the center of it, locking people in and taking money and collecting money to keep these big, huge churches booming. That wasn't the deal. But yeah, the freed enslaved Black people secretly joined together at the church as they prayed for the new year to bring the freedom they fought for and dreamed of, doing so in secret in some states that have slave codes prohibiting them from religious gatherings. So that's what the shut-in was, okay? And it was since become a mainstay, not only a nod to their history, but a prayer that symbolizes the community's plight. So there's so much history in the rituals that we do, and we're not even aware of why we do them, and then they just evolve into some other stuff that really isn't about what the intentional purpose was of the church. And even, as it speaks to in the Bible, it's just so different from what, it started off as. And I think for some are straying away from that. And I think that people need to pull it back in and stop using the church, for those who do, as a money grab. I think that needs to change. Black churches across the nation still hold services. And again, they called it Watch Night, and also Freedom's Eve. And those who participate come together for a call to action. This was even done in the 50s and 60s. That's what the churches were used for those who supported getting free from oppression. And so the lock-in, yeah, I know they do that too as well. They use that term, but it's usually for the youth. They have programs where the youth can spend the night, and it's, centered around the same things a shut-in would do: food, music, worship, all of those things. So yeah, so a little different. So what the church was, it's really morphing into something different. We still have good people who are doing the Lord's work. And, some people don't even make money. I know people that, pretty much use their own money, work a job to be able to support an institution, a building, a place. Hell, when I was growing up, my grandmother used to have church in the living room. Now, we've had church in buildings. She's had buildings sometimes, but we would have church in the living room, and people would come over, and we had an organ, and I don't know how many of us was it, and we would do our worship and praise right there in the living room. So to me, that's a sign of doing something for the love of God and for the love of people and for the will of improving the mental state, and to just help people be better in life, because you're not making any money having church in your living room. But then these mega churches, yeah, it's a little different. And yeah, so that's my takeaway from that. I never would have paid it. I wouldn't have, and I would have left, and I wish somebody would have stopped me. No, I don't. But if they had, it would have been a problem. It would have been a misunderstanding. That's all I'm saying in my Bernie Mac voice. It would have been a misunderstanding. And you know, so yeah, that's my takeaway from all of that. Yeah, I don't, I don't know how you make sense out of it. I really don't. I really, really don't. But also, this is the ending, we're ending Women's History Month. And so I'm going to go get my last shout out to another great person in Women's History Month. Her name is Jarena Lee. She was born February 11, 1783, passed February 3rd, 1864. And guess what, y'all? She was the first woman preacher in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, that's AME. Born into a free Black family in New Jersey, Lee asked the founder of the AME Church, his name was Richard Allen, to be a preacher. Although Allen initially refused after hearing her preach in 1819, Allen approved her preaching ministry. He later approved her preaching ministry. She was a leader in the Wesleyan holiness movement. She preached the doctrine of entire sanctification as an internate pastor throughout the pulpits of the African Methodist, the AME denomination in 1836. Lee also became the first African American woman to publish an autobiography. Shout out to Miss Lee, Jarena Lee. But before she became the first Black woman preacher, Jarena married Joseph Lee in 1811. That was 7 years after joining Philadelphia's Mother Bethel. During their marriage, her husband did not want her to preach, so she felt forced to put her spiritual needs on hold for her marriage. And it said that her not being fully committed to her spiritual needs resulted in Lee becoming ill and in a sense of discontent. And, after Joseph Lee, her husband, died 6 years into the marriage, they had 2 kids together. She didn't return and was fully devoted to her religious concerns, but her ill health never recovered. So she lived to be 80 years old. But yeah, she didn't really get into preaching and being allowed to preach until after her husband passed. And, we still have that stigma to this day, not having women pastors and preachers. And they're just, people just have their sexist ways about them. But, they try to use the Bible to defend and support why they don't think women should, speak. And they think that women shouldn't lead men. We can have them. We can push them out. We can carry them for 9 months and push them out and feed them from our breasts, and we can raise them up until they're able to hold their own necks up and walk on their own 2 feet and, maintain without the support of us as women in the world. But we don't need to hear your wisdom. We don't need to hear God's word coming from your mouth. It's what I heard when I hear people say that. So women were not allowed to preach due to biblical reasons in the past. These reasons included the idea that women should not lead men, and the prohibition of preaching and authoritative teaching by women in the congregation of the church was coming from an interpretation, per se, from the book of Timothy, chapter 2, verse 12, as forbidding women from being senior pastors. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, y'all. The church is very, in any religion, it's very, it's complicated and it's layered. And again, it's kind of why I kind of stray away from religion, so to speak, because this man's law is a little different from God's law. And sometimes people like to add the man's law into God's law, and then it becomes a sticky situation. And yeah, it kind of deters me away from that. Yeah, so I never would have paid it. Before we close out, I did want to give you a few quotes as well from some people that I listened to. Let's see what we have here. I wanted to get on Dick Gregory and what he had to say, just talking about we have one job on earth. If you guys don't know, Dick Gregory was an author, very adamant about health and wellness and just taking care of yourself, and just a common sense type of guy who spoke, the truth. This is also the man who named one of his daughters Queen, just so that she would be respected each time anyone addressed her, because he came from that time where, we were called boys and gals because the white man and woman did not want to respect us. We going back into that, it feels like, but it is what it is. But this is what Dick Gregory had to say about you have one job on earth.
Or bigot, or thief, or murderer. Pick that up on the way. It's just that simple. Now y'all play all the games you want, get hung up in all the churches you want, be full of hatred, let somebody reduce you below your dignity and don't know you violating the universal God. Let a bunch of thugs control your food, a bunch of hoodlums control your education, everything. And y'all think y'all are so powerful and clean. They got engineered animals that you put on your table every day, and America's the only country don't have to put on the label that they've been cloned and you think you free.
That's him giving his rant. And then before I close out, this was an interesting conversation that I was listening to. This man asked Chat GPT, are you guys asking Chat GPT questions and getting responses? Like, it's really thorough in this conversation. Not to say that it's accurate, but it actually gives you a response as if you were talking to an actual human being. So someone is inputting this data one way or another, and then it's being regurgitated based on the question that you're asking, which I find very, very weird. And I haven't tried it because I think it's spooky. But are you guys using Chat GPT? This is a man who asked Chat GPT, what if basically asking if there was a devil, how would it destroy the people? And so this is a formula Chat GPT gave in explaining how the devil would destroy the people.
If you were the devil, how would you destroy the young people of the next generation without them realizing it?
The way I would destroy the young people of the next generation without them even noticing is this. I'd start early, before they even know who they are. And I'd keep them so distracted, they never even think to ask. I'd remove purpose from their childhoods. Make sure they're addicted to dopamine before they even hit their teens, until they're overstimulated, underdeveloped, and unable to sit still, so that by the time real life demands something from them, they're already slaves to impulse. I'd let them chase pleasure, chase noise, chase approval, and I'd make silence feel unbearable. Then I'd make faith look like homework, something boring, rigid, and irrelevant. I'd convince them that obedience and honoring parents is weakness, and package rebellion as self-love. I'd tell them independence means isolation, that needing people is embarrassing, that asking for guidance is outdated. I'd shift the culture so that sin looks like self-expression. Let them believe their desires are divine, and anything that restrains them, especially God, is their enemy. I'd glamorize influencers who stand for nothing. I'd make vanity look like confidence, and make fame the highest form of validation. I'd keep them stuck by always comparing themselves to everything they see on social media. Then I'd keep them afraid of thinking deeply, ashamed of walking against the crowd, and desperate to fit in and belong to a world that's falling apart. And when they finally feel the emptiness, I'd make sure they never trace it back to the absence of God. I'd keep them chasing empty validation loops, podcasts, self-love routines, anything but submission. I'd tell them, you don't need a tribe. You don't need brotherhood. You don't need to be around people who remind you of God. And finally, I'd re-engineer the world itself so that the tribes of evil feel welcoming and the communities of truth feel foreign, weird, and boring. That's how I'd win. Not with blood, not with fire, but with confusion and comfort.
That's what it is, y'all. That's what it is. And the devil is a master of confusion, author of deception. And we got to stay aware and know that it's intentional. The things that they're trying to do to keep us distracted, to keep us away from the goodness of God, doing the right thing in life, is intentional because, again, this is where we're at. We're on earth. We live amongst those who do not have good intentions and goodwill, and that's just what it is. But you guys, you know what? Thank you so much hanging out with your girl, listening to your girl. Don't forget, even if you're listening later, feel free to share your perspective on anything that was discussed today. You know what I'm saying? And maybe we'll be back next week. We'll see. Thank you, guys. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to learn something new before you go to bed today. Much love. God bless.